We left off on our last episode with Samson and Delilah, and Samson just finished a festival in Timnah, and he told a riddle to his wife's companions, 30 companions of the Philistines, and they guessed the riddle. So now he has to give them 30 linen garments, and he goes to a location called Ashkelon. Remember that Samson was from a place called Machanadan, which means tents and camps, and now he's going to go to Ashkelon. Well, what was Ashkelon? Well, in our next slide, this is an artist's depiction of the ancient gates of Ashkelon. I was there several years ago with Dr. Ann Davis, and there must be millions and millions of bricks that make up the gate of the city. It's not just any gate, but it's a very rare arch gateway. The only other one was found way in the north. It was called Tel Dan, a location called Tel Dan. It's a gate archway that dates from the Middle Bronze period. This one looks like it might begin around the Late Bronze into the Iron Age period. The entry gates are actually hewn sandstone. So when I was there were just thousands and thousands of stones, and me and Ann, well, basically I did, picked up a stone, and sandstone is not little. It's a pretty good chunk of rock, and we put it in the trunk of her rent-a-car, and it basically dropped probably about 6 inches. And then we took it to the motel room, and I put it in my luggage, and you can imagine what that big rock did to my luggage on the way home. But anyway, it was from Ashkelon. Now, over a period of years, with the finances of the Leon Levy Foundation, Lawrence Steger and his crew from Harvard University built this exquisite example of a gateway and its protection and surroundings, okay? You can go there to this day and see it, but this is the gateway, possibly, that in the Epic of Samson, they would have walked through at that time period. The Spirit of Jehovah came mightily upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and smote 30 men, and took their spoil, and gave charges of raiment unto them, and declared the riddle. Now, remember the gateway that I just showed you? In the excavation many years ago, this is the way it looked, right? You can see the beginning of an archway, but look, it's all filled with debris, the whole archway. And Samson went and caught 300 foxes. This is the next episode. And he took firebrands and turned tail to tail, and put the firebrand in the midst between every tail, 2 tails. And when he had set the brands on fire, he let them go into the standing grain of the Philistines and burn up both standing grain and also the olive groves. Now, why is this important? Because remember I showed you in the last episode the Asherah and the Baal? These are gods of fertility. Defiling their vineyards, defiling their grain, their crops, is a way of also saying that our God is stronger than yours. See that your God can't even defend your vineyards. Who is your God then? See how he's defiling the Philistines directly by offending their gods. And Samson went to Gaza and saw there a harlot and went unto her. And it was told the Gazites, saying, Samson has come here. They compassed him in. That means they surround him in the city. And laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city, and were quiet all night, saying, in the morning, then we will kill him. Samson arose at midnight and laid hold of the doors of the gates of the city, and plucked them up, bar and all, and put them upon his shoulders, and carried them up to the top of the mountain that is before Hebron. Now remember, Hebron was also the first capital of King David before Jerusalem, all right? But Hebron is a long way to carry the gates. And that's very symbolic, because what goes on at the gates of the city? You read, there's the judges of the city, the elders that come to the gate of the city. And the gate of the city is the weakest point, because it's going to be surrounded by a large wall, as you have seen. So it's the weakest point, so it has to be protected by their gods. So we find standing stones called masavots at the entry of the gates of the city. And also altars where you can give an offering to the gods of the city at a higher location, place of elevation, called the bema. So we see standing stones, masavots, and also the high altars, bemas, okay? Here, we're not at Ashkelon, we're actually at Bethsaida, but ancient Bethsaida during the Iron Age, and we're looking at the gates, okay? This is an excavation that has a significance, of course, in the New Testament time period as well, called Bethsaida, which is mentioned in the New Testament, one of the cities where Jesus chose his disciples. But this is the Iron Age gate, okay? So here on one side, the lower side, you're going to see a standing stone. All right? Standing stones are a way, we're adults here, it's a way of saying that your God is fertile. It's like the male erection, all right? That you're fertile. And you'll see even the Egyptians do the same thing. You'll see a God with an erection. This means that that is a fertile God, a God of fertility, all right? Next to that, you'll see a standing stone, which looks to be some kind of a bull with horns, all right? And on that, or below that stone, you'll see a little altar where you can put the offerings, but it's elevated. Okay, this is from a distant shot. You can see the gate on both sides, the standing stone, and also the bamah, the high place of the offering. So when Samson is taking the gates of the city, once again, he's defiling the Philistine gods. This is how we read into it. This is how the ancients are reading into it. He defiles them by killing the lion. Remember the lion lady? He defiles them by burning their vineyards. It's not just the lion lady, but now it's Baal. Also, the god of the city, the main god of the Philistines is Dagon, which we read earlier on when the ark is captive in the Philistine cities. But Dagon is found on his face, okay, later on. The standing stones and the bamah. Remember, that's why it's symbolic to read that text and understand archaeology and Near Eastern traditions as well. And it came to pass that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. In some rabbinical commentaries, and I'm going to say some rabbinical commentaries, scholars suggest that word Delilah has its root in the word darkness, to be dim. Okay? Now think about that, because what is going to happen? Verse 5, and the Lord of the Philistines said to her, entice him, and see where his great strength lie, and by what means we may prevail against him, and we will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. And Delilah said to Samson, tell me where your great strength lie. And she said unto him, the Philistines are upon you, because remember, he tells her, but he's not telling her the truth. And he breaks the ropes as though they were under the torch of fire. So his strength was not known. In other words, he's shucking and jiving her. He's having a little fun. It came to pass, when she pressed him daily with her words, that his soul was vexed unto death. And he told her all his heart. And he said to her, there has not come a razor upon my head. For I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. How is he going to become like any other man? Because he is breaking his commitments to Yahweh. Number one, do not touch anything unclean. Okay? He touched the dead carcass of a lion. He's not supposed to drink any strong drinks, such as wine or beer, but yet he was having a party in the custom of the Philistines where he found 30 companions. You should read into that he was drinking and he was having a big party, okay? And then, so we got two right there. The third one, and the final straw, is that he gets his hair cut. Not that the strength was in his hair. Not that his strength was in drinking or not drinking wine. His strength was in obedience to God. And once he broke all these covenants, his strength is going to leave him. And the Philistines laid hold of him, and they put out his eyes. Now remember, according to rabbinical commentaries, what Delilah means. There's the clue that this is what's going to happen to Samson, who means brilliant, sunlight, Shemesh is Samson, if he falls for the plot of darkness, Delilah, the Philistines. This is how you should read into this. And they bound him with fetters of brass, and he did grind in the prison house. Howbeit, the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaven. I'm reading this not verbatim, not word by word, but you understand the text of Samson and Delilah, so I'm hitting the high points. And the lords of the Philistines gathered them together to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon. See, Dagon is the Philistines' main god. It's kind of like a fish god, but they were sea people. Their god, and to rejoice, for they said, our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, to our hand. So they called for Samson that he may make sport for them. And they called and Samson, so they called for Samson, and they set him between the pillars. And Samson took hold of the two middle pillars upon which the house rests. And he pushed with all his might, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were there. But Samson also died in the process. Now we're going to go into some archaeology here. I think you're going to find this fascinating. This is from Tel Kassil. Tel Kassil, right outside of Tel Aviv. Now, it's in a fenced-in location, and it's at the top of a hill because, once again, high places are what we call tells. The word tel in Hebrew means strength. So we're at a tel site, and we're at the top of the tel at the level of the Philistines. So we're somewhere probably Iron Age 1 period. And what the nation of Israel has done is they have recreated from the excavation and ruins a Philistine, you could say, town, village, city, along with possibly a temple, a Philistine temple, because it says that they were going to present Samson to their gods. Now here is the ruins. You can see that it's under a roof of a construction, so it's preserved. But if you look at that very, very carefully, you can see a number of different rooms. But in the center of this picture, I want to point out two columns and how close they are together. Now these are, two column bases, of which two columns would have been posted on top. All right, so we have two column bases, and look how close they are. I know that you're used to seeing Hollywood and also the different types of images of these huge, huge columns that three men couldn't even reach around, and this is what Samson took down. But it's not necessarily the case. I'll tell you what. Now join me in the room of 1,000 artifacts. Here I am in the room of 1,000 artifacts, and we have all kinds of different, you can say, artifacts made of terracotta, made of stone, made of bronze. But what we don't see here is any artifacts made of iron, because iron rusts. I think it's kind of interesting that, it's rare, but we do find iron, remnants of iron, and sometimes a whole blade made of iron in Philistines' ruins, because the Bible tells us that the Philistines did make weapons out of iron. But here we don't have any, because iron rust is very rare. It's interesting in the biblical text, because if they had iron, and if you were cut by iron and you didn't die, you probably would get tetanus. And I don't think there's any evidence in the scriptures of somebody suffering from tetanus. And I think that's interesting. Not that they didn't have iron, because archaeology proves that there is. But I wonder if there's a historical evidence anywhere being written of somebody suffering from what we would call today tetanus. That would be an interesting study and maybe good for a dissertation. Okay, an artist's reconstruction of this temple. If you look very carefully, you see the different rooms. Now, you can go to the internet and Google Philistine temples, and you can get the same picture that I have right here, but you can see it's numbered. So you can go through, which we don't have time for, and go through this number system, and it's going to tell you each and every area of the structure according to archaeologists that have actually excavated this location, all right? But once again, to point out the center structure, that the roof is held together by two basic columns. And the Bible does have knowledge of the Philistines in such a way that it says that it's important that Samson is placed between these two pillars, and that if he pulls on these two pillars, the roof will collapse. And here through archaeology, we found this structure in which the roof, if it did remain, would be supported by two columns. So what we have in this biblical text is actually have a custom. And I don't think the authors are writing this haphazardly, but they're trying to preserve the Hebrew culture by what we read in the text, so that later people can be aware by what defiles the Israelites. How are they going to preserve who they are as a people, to be identified with their God? I'm just going to say Jehovah, if you will. All right? Now, the biblical text says different things about Samson as a warning. The Danites are living in a central location very close to, or even on the Shephelah, maybe even too close to the Philistines. The Philistines are very colorful people. We looked at their pottery, which I showed you last week. I'm going to hold it up again. This is a shard. This is called bichrome. It probably dates between 1200 and 1000 BCE. This was given to the collection by Trudy Doughton, who wrote this particular book on Philistines. And she is the expert. I think you can still get this book on Amazon with no problem. And I recommend reading it, all right? So, but before we get to this bichrome pottery, we had a selection of pottery that was monochrome, which we see right here. Now, Samson does not really say that he's using any types of weapons, but weapons of this time period or previous, before that time period, could be an axe blade, which we see an Epsilon axe. This is dating to the Middle Bronze Age. But once again, it's made out of bronze. Or maybe a duckbill axe. Once again, Middle Bronze Age, but different types of axes. How about this little guy right here? This looks pretty mean in itself. Either end probably would hurt. And then we have this bronze knife. This dates from a period in the Middle Bronze Age called the Hyksos period. And then we have this large sword. I don't know if you can get this particular sword on camera. This dates to the Assyrian period. So we can say the 8th century BC. All types of weaponry from the Bible. It seems like kids always like weaponry of the Bible. So I like to show different weapons. But the greatest weapon that Samson had was his obedience to God. Because once he started breaking these commitments, such as he's probably drinking with the Philistines. Now, I'm not telling you not to drink or what to drink. I'm just saying this particular biblical text. He was supposed to be a Nazarite from birth. That means committed to God. And he's going to say, "Thus saith the Lord," as a judge of Israel. And if he's doing things or similar things that the pagans do, that becomes very confusing for the people. Well, who's saying this? Is it Baal? Is it Dagon? Is it Asherah? All right. Or is it Yahweh? And the people are confused. All right. And Dan, the word itself, means judge. So Samson is from the tribe of Dan. However, he's living in the territory which is simply called Mechana, Dan, tents and camps. So his people are still living in tents, and the Philistines have these temples, this very colorful pottery, and you can see how this would be an attraction to the young men. Would the Israelites lose who they are to the culture of the Philistines? Maybe to the culture of the Egyptians, the Babylonians, maybe later on the Assyrians, the Babylonians. How about the Greeks? Maybe even the Romans. Well, how about even today? Do we lose our identity of who we are and who we worship to the culture that seems most prevalent and exciting and fantastic to us in the culture in which we live? Or do we keep our promise and our commitment to who we are as a people? I think that's what the text is saying. And here, over 2,000 years later, Israel has returned back to its land. We still can designate and point to a group of people called Israelite. So I think the Bible was trying to preserve who they are in the epic of Samson and Delilah. I think it's done a pretty good job. What we're going to do right now is actually go back to the archaeological dig of Tel El Safi. And we're going to look at some biblical artifacts because as you go down to the time period of the Philistines, think of these ancient tell sites, these mounds, as laundry baskets. And Friday's laundry is going to be on the bottom. Wednesday's laundry is going to be in the middle, all right? And Friday's is going to be on the very top. So the top artifacts are going to be the most recent. So at the top of the tell, we might find artifacts from the Iron Age period. And as we go a little lower, we might say Iron Age 2, then to Iron Age 1. And then we go to the Late Bronze Age period, and then we're going to go into the Middle Bronze Age period. So Middle Bronze Age is the time period of Abraham, the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. And then into the Late Bronze Age, the time period we could say of Moses, the Exodus, and Joshua going into the Promised Land. And then as we begin the Iron Age 1 period, 1200 to 1000 BC, this would be suggested the time period of the judges, such as Samson. All right, well, before we get to the time period of Samson, which is the Iron Age 1, right after the Late Bronze Age period, of course, we're going from the oldest to the more recent, we got to go through the Iron Age. How do you know when you're through the Iron Age? Well, first of all, we have to look at the pottery. The pottery means so much that there's actually several books designated and dedicated to pottery of ancient Israel. All right, and we're going to look at some of this pottery from, let's say, the Middle Bronze Age, from the Iron Age period back through the Iron Age, and possibly even here the late Bronze Age to Middle Bronze Age period. I think you'll enjoy this. All right? So, in our next slide, this pottery basically is possibly Iron Age 2 to Iron Age 1. And I've also shown you some pieces from this period, such as this one right here. A Cypriot vessel. We say it's a red slip, all right, with the circular designs. Circular designs. We have three spouts. 1, 2, 3. 3 is tri. So in archaeology, we just say, yes, it's a three-spouted juglet. We have to say trifoiled, a trifoiled mouth. Then we turn it over and we look at the base and we say, what kind of base is it? We can have a flat base, all right, or we can have what we call a ring base. Now you see an elevated ring around it. This is what we call ring base, all right? Ring bases actually give the pottery a little bit more stability, so when you set it down, if the table or the ground is not particularly clean, there might be some fragments on it. If it actually hits something hard, it would crack. So they put this little depression in it with a ring base to make the pottery more stable, the vessel more stable. Okay? So now we're going to go to, let's say, the late Bronze Age period. The most colorful pottery I think of is late Bronze Age. Iron Age 1, late Bronze Age. This is where we see the bichrome, the multicolor browns and whites and blues and blacks are designated from this late Bronze Age period, such as this vessel right here. All right? So here we have the handle. Looks like there's a little depression in the middle of it. Some of the paint is worn off, but you can see it's multiple colors. Very crude type of painting. All right, you see a little circle design from the top and some squiggly lines in black with a white slip. Here we actually have a red color tint for the top. Now, if the rim actually goes inward, okay, we call that inverted, and it goes outward, everted. So this comes outward, you can see where the rim is actually coming out. It's an everted rim. We'll turn it over. Once again, a ring base. A ring base. So this is late Bronze Age. Okay, we got another vessel right here. This is probably from the island of Crete. You can hear that the pottery was fired at very high temperature. It's a very fine texture of clay. It has more than one color brown. So once again, it's a bichrome. It's little two handles. It must have had a lid at one time. So this is probably what we would refer to as a style of, remember this one right here? A style of a pyxis. A pyxis used to store perfume. This is a Mycenaean style, but once again, it's found locally. So we call it imitation made locally. This looks like it's from the island of Crete. Of course, it's very fine pottery. This was actually found in the land of Israel. So it also lets us know about you could say, the trade route and the commerce at that time period. This is a dipper juglet that's probably from the end of the Middle Bronze Age, around, we could say 18th century to around 1550 BC or 16th century or mid-16th century. Here we have we have a white slip, everted rim, with a little bit of invert is on the top as well. So there's a little combination of both. And a handle has some little fragment missing out of it. So you can tell it's a coarser clay with a very fine slip. So it actually is made locally. And we have two different colors of brown, a lighter brown with a darker brown circling, we could say, if I was going to show it to you like this, it kind of looks like a pear. So we're not going to say pear shape, right? This is archaeology. We call it paraform. A paraform-shaped vessel. Paraform-shaped vessels seem to appear in the Middle Bronze Age. A Canaanite style, later on also developed into a Hyksos-style vessel called Tel El Yehudaware. But this looks like it's the end of the Middle Bronze Age, so it's still paraform in shape. And these are the shoulders. This is the neck. And once again, ring base. Ring base. So Middle Bronze Age. This is an odd piece. This was actually found in a hoard of artifacts. And you wonder, what the heck is it? Now, it was actually found like as a lid. Now, if an item breaks and you reuse it, it's called secondary use. Secondary use. But really what it was a cult stand. So a cult stand would be like a chalice. And this was a base of the chalice. And the chalice would come up here, and you'd have the actual drinking cup or libation cup at the very top. This is called, it looks like a flute, fluted base, a fluted base. Once again, look at the handle. This is red slip. 3 pouring spouts, trifoiled, ring base, dates from the Iron Age II period, 8th century BC, and this is Samaritan ware. Remember, the Samaritans return from the Assyrian conquest. It goes along with this bowl. It's got red slip on it. Once again, look at this thick ring base. Once again, Iron Age. So here, within the selection of pottery that I've shown you, we can actually designate what location we're at in history as we go through a dig site. I hope you find this interesting. Thank you very much for digging the Bible.
Bible Interact, uncovering the mysteries of the kingdom of God. At BibleInteract.tv, you will penetrate the scriptures of the Bible. At our store, you're just one click away from owning your favorite books, DVDs, or study guides. Earn a degree from our university and watch hundreds of video presentations from biblical scholars, archaeologists, and theologians. By subscribing to Bible Interact, you'll find all the resources you'll need, so why not subscribe today? Go to www.BibleInteract.tv. You'll be glad you did. Interested in studying more about the temple, the Messiah, or what God's plan is for our future? No problem. We've got you covered. With more than 200 DVDs, books, and workbooks, you'll find the answers you've been searching for. Bible Interact, uncovering the mysteries of the kingdom of God.